Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something tonight that might shake a few hearts and open a few minds. There comes a moment in every man's life when he realizes she didn't reach out, no call, no message, no just checking on you. And trust me, when that moment hits, something starts happening in his mind that he never expected. When you stop reaching out, the first thing that happens in a man's mind is silence stops being peaceful and starts becoming loud. At the beginning, he tells himself it's nothing. He convinces himself you're just busy, distracted, living your life. He scrolls his phone, checks the time, keeps moving. But silence has a strange power. It creates space. And in that space, a man is forced to sit with his own thoughts. When you were reaching out, he didn't have to think much. Your messages filled the gaps. Your attention kept his emotions comfortable. But once that disappears, his mind no longer has a shield. Reflection begins, whether he wants it or not. He starts asking questions he avoided before. Why hasn't she texted? Did I mess something up? Did I take her for granted? Silence doesn't argue, doesn't accuse, doesn't explain, but it demands awareness, and awareness hits harder than words ever could. When you stop reaching out, you stop reacting, and that changes everything. A man can dismiss emotions spoken out loud, but he cannot dismiss the quiet absence of someone who once cared. As the hours pass, his thoughts grow deeper. He remembers how consistent you were, how you checked in, how you made space for him in your life. And now, without that presence, he feels the difference. Silence makes him compare. Before, your effort felt normal. Now, its absence feels heavy. That's when reflection turns personal. He doesn't just think about you, he thinks about himself, his actions, his behavior, his energy, and for the first time, he wonders if he did enough to deserve you. What really unsettles him is realizing you didn't disappear out of weakness. You didn't beg, you didn't chase, you didn't explain yourself, you simply stopped. And that tells his mind something powerful. You chose yourself. That choice forces him to look inward. Because if you can walk away from reaching out, it means you are not dependent on his response. And independence is intimidating to a man who assumed you'd always be there. Silence removes control. When you were reaching out, he knew where he stood. He knew he could respond later, give less, do the minimum. But now he doesn't know what you're thinking. And that uncertainty breaks his routine. His mind starts filling the gaps with imagination. He wonders if you're happier, if someone else is making you smile, if he lost his place in your life. Reflection grows stronger because silence leaves room for consequences. And here's the truth most people don't talk about. Reflection is uncomfortable. It strips away excuses. It exposes emotions a man thought he had under control. When you don't reach out, you're not punishing him. You're allowing him to face reality without distractions. And in that quiet space, his mind finally wakes up. When a man realizes you didn't reach out, the next thing that happens in his mind is doubt about his importance in your life. At one point, he felt secure knowing you were there. Your consistency gave him comfort. Even if he didn't always show appreciation, he believed your presence was permanent. But the moment you stop reaching out, that sense of security begins to crack. He starts questioning where he truly stands with you, and that question doesn't leave him alone. At first, he tells himself it doesn't matter. He convinces himself that if you wanted to talk, you would. But the longer the silence lasts, the harder it becomes to ignore. He checks his phone more often than he admits. He rereads old messages, searching for clues. He remembers moments when you showed care and effort, and now he wonders why that effort is gone. That's when doubt turns inward. He begins to ask himself whether he made you feel unimportant, whether he failed to meet you halfway. This realization is unsettling because it challenges his self-image. Men often tie their worth to how they are perceived. Knowing that you chose not to reach out makes him wonder if he lost his value in your eyes. He questions whether he is still desired, still respected, still relevant in your world. And when a man feels his importance slipping, it shakes his confidence more than rejection ever could. Your absence forces him to see the imbalance. Before, he might not have noticed how much effort you gave compared to what he offered in return. Now that effort is gone, the contrast is obvious. He recognizes that you were investing emotionally while he was simply receiving. And this awareness brings discomfort. He starts wondering if he assumed too much, if he relied on your consistency without earning it. As the silence continues, his mind begins creating scenarios. He wonders if you've moved on emotionally, if you've decided you deserve more, if you're no longer waiting for him to step up. The idea that you could be fine without him is deeply unsettling. It forces him to confront a truth he avoided. Your attention was a choice, not an obligation. And once that choice is removed, he feels the weight of what he might have lost. This doubt doesn't just affect how he sees you, it affects how he sees himself. He reevaluates his actions, his words, his effort. He may feel regret for moments when he was distant, distracted, or dismissive. The realization that his place in your life is not guaranteed changes his mindset. He begins to understand that importance is maintained through effort, not assumed through time. When a man realizes you didn't reach out, his ego and his emotions begin a quiet battle inside his mind. On the surface, he wants to appear unbothered. His pride tells him to stay still, to wait, to not be the first one to break the silence. Ego convinces him that reaching out first would make him look weak, as if he cares more than he should. So he holds back even when his thoughts keep circling around you. This internal conflict is exhausting because while his ego wants control, his emotions want connection. He tells himself stories to protect his pride. He assumes you're trying to get his attention or teach him a lesson. He convinces himself that you'll come back eventually, just like before. But the longer you don't reach out, the harder it becomes for him to believe those stories. His ego thrives on predictability, and your silence removes that comfort. Suddenly, he doesn't know what move comes next, and that uncertainty makes his pride uneasy. At the same time, his emotions start speaking louder. He misses the familiarity of your presence. He misses being checked on, being thought of, being important to someone. Small moments trigger memories, songs, places, routines that remind him of you. And when those emotions surface, his ego rushes in to silence them. He tells himself he doesn't need anyone. He distracts himself with work, friends, or entertainment. But distraction doesn't erase emotion, it only delays it. This push and pull creates tension in his mind. Part of him wants to reach out just to feel reassured, to know you're still there. Another part of him refuses to do it because it would mean admitting that your absence affected him. For many men, admitting emotional impact feels like surrender. So instead, he stays quiet, hoping time will fix what silence has broken. What really intensifies this battle is the realization that you're not chasing him anymore. His ego was comfortable when he felt pursued or prioritized. Now, without that attention, his emotional side feels exposed. He starts questioning why your absence affects him so deeply. He wonders when caring turned into attachment and why he didn't notice it sooner. As time goes on, his emotions begin to chip away at his pride. He recognizes that his ego may have cost him something meaningful. He remembers moments when he could have shown more effort or appreciation. He realizes that staying silent might protect his pride, but it could also lead to loss. And that thought lingers in his mind, creating a slow but powerful shift in awareness. When a man realizes you didn't reach out, he is forced to sit with the consequences of his own actions. Without your messages, without your effort, there is no distraction left to soften the truth. He can no longer hide behind business or excuses. The silence gives him time to reflect on how he showed up, how he responded, and how often he assumed you would always be there no matter what he did or didn't do. This realization is uncomfortable because it removes the illusion that everything was fine. He begins replaying moments where he could have done better, times when he replied late, brushed things off, or failed to show emotional presence. What once felt insignificant now feels heavy. Your absence magnifies his mistakes. He starts to understand that actions don't disappear just because time passes. They leave impressions, and those impressions eventually turn into distance when ignored. The silence becomes a mirror. It reflects his behavior back to him without judgment, but with honesty. He recognizes patterns he avoided seeing before. Maybe he took your patience for granted. Maybe he relied on your understanding instead of earning it. When you stopped reaching out, you didn't argue or explain, you simply withdrew. And that withdrawal forces him to connect the dots between his behavior and the current distance. What affects him most is realizing that you didn't owe him continued effort. Your presence was a choice, and choices can change. That truth settles slowly in his mind. He understands that love, care, and attention are maintained through consistency, not entitlement. And this understanding can be painful because it means accepting responsibility instead of placing blame. As he reflects, he may feel regret, not dramatic regret, but quiet regret, the kind that shows up late at night when distractions fade. He wonders if he misjudged your limits, if he assumed you'd tolerate more than you should have. He realizes that you didn't leave suddenly, you likely pulled back gradually, and he didn't notice until it was too late. This awareness changes how he sees you. He no longer sees you as someone who will always adjust or wait. He sees you as someone who valued herself enough to stop giving when the balance was lost. And that realization stays with him because it teaches him a lesson that words never could. Effort matters, timing matters, and neglect always has consequences. When a man realizes you didn't reach out, something shifts in the balance of power inside his mind. Before, he felt in control because he knew you would show up, check in, and keep the connection alive. Your effort gave him certainty. He didn't have to wonder where he stood or whether the bond would continue because you were consistent. But the moment you stop reaching out, that certainty disappears, and with it, the comfort of control. He starts to feel unsettled because the dynamic has changed. Now he is the one wondering. He is the one checking his phone, replaying conversations, questioning silence. This role reversal is powerful because it forces him to experience what you may have felt for a long time. He begins to understand what it's like to wait, to hope, to question someone's interest, and that awareness hits his ego hard. Your self-control becomes impossible for him to ignore. You didn't lash out. You didn't demand explanations. You didn't chase or beg for reassurance. You simply stopped giving access to your energy. That restraint communicates strength without saying a word. It tells him that you know your worth and that you're not willing to overextend yourself for someone who isn't matching your effort. As he sits with this realization, he becomes more aware of his own emotional dependence. He may not have labeled it that way before, but your absence reveals it. He misses the validation your attention provided. He misses feeling important to someone who genuinely cared, and now that it's gone, he feels exposed. He understands that he benefited from your presence more than he admitted. This shift forces him to reevaluate how power actually works in emotional connections. He realizes that the person who can walk away from reaching out is the person who holds the most strength, not because they are cold, but because they are grounded. And that understanding stays with him. It challenges the belief that control comes from indifference. Instead, he learns that real power comes from self-respect. Your silence also removes pressure from you and places it on him. Now, if the connection is to continue, the responsibility falls on him to act, and that pressure makes him think more carefully. He understands that if he reaches out, it must come from intention, not convenience. And if he doesn't, he risks losing something meaningful. This internal shift changes how he views relationships going forward. He learns that effort is not something to be assumed or delayed. It is something that must be maintained. And your decision not to reach out becomes the moment he understands that emotional balance matters more than ego. When a man realizes you didn't reach out, the final and deepest shift happens inside him. He is forced to choose between growth and retreat. Everything that came before, the silence, the doubt, the ego battle, the loss of control, leads to this moment. He can no longer stay in confusion. His mind begins searching for resolution, and that resolution can only go in one of two directions. If he chooses growth, he starts seeing the situation with honesty. He accepts that your silence is not a game, but a response. He understands that something in the dynamic wasn't working, and instead of blaming you, he looks inward. This is when maturity shows. He reflects on how he communicated, how consistent he was, and how often he met you with presence instead of convenience. Growth requires humility, and humility doesn't come easily. It means admitting that he may have contributed to the distance more than he realized. This awareness creates discomfort, but it also creates clarity. He begins to understand that emotional connections don't survive on assumptions. They survive on effort, accountability, and mutual respect. Your absence becomes a lesson, not a punishment. And lessons, when accepted, change behavior. A man in this mindset doesn't rush. He becomes more intentional. It's not to fill silence or soothe his ego, but to rebuild trust with purpose. But not every man chooses growth. Some choose retreat. Retreat looks like denial. He convinces himself that it doesn't matter, that he didn't care as much as he thought. He protects his pride by rewriting the story. He minimizes the connection so he doesn't have to face the loss. This choice feels easier in the moment because it avoids vulnerability, but it comes at a cost. Retreat means repeating the same patterns in future connections, never fully understanding why things keep falling apart. What separates these two paths is courage. Growth requires emotional bravery, the willingness to feel uncomfortable emotions without running from them. Retreat requires nothing but avoidance. And your silence forces this choice because it removes distractions. He can't rely on your effort anymore to keep things afloat. He has to meet the moment with intention or let it pass. As this realization settles in, he understands something important about you. He sees that you didn't stop reaching out to manipulate him. You stopped because you reached your limit. And recognizing that boundary changes how he sees you forever. He understands that you value peace over chaos, self-respect over attachment, and that awareness lingers in his mind long after the silence ends. Even if he never reaches out, the impact remains. Your absence becomes a reference point in his emotional memory. He remembers the woman who chose herself instead of waiting. And that memory influences how he approaches future relationships. He becomes more aware of how easily meaningful connections can be lost when effort is uneven. In the end, your silence doesn't guarantee reconciliation, but it guarantees realization. It forces him to confront who he is when effort is required and comfort is gone. And whether he grows or retreats, one truth stays with him: losing access to you changed him in ways he didn't expect.